you can't be a professor here. You have to be a guide.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? You can't, nobody's going to listen to you if you stand up at the front of the room and lecture them and tell them how they're right or wrong, or they won't give you the time of day, or they won't for very long, but they'll listen to a river guide, right? Who's going, okay, well, we're not going to paddle towards that eddy. We're going to try to miss that, right? That's getting them involved, but also kind of directing the way. And
welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest. Hey, welcome back to Jesus in the Upper Left. We are really pumped to be here with you. My name is Gabe Kolstad from Westside Community Church in Aloha, and this is my great friend, Steve Barker. He's here with me today. Steve,
hey, Gabe.
Glad you're here.
Me too.
Yeah, we're going to get into all sorts of stuff today, but one of the things that we're going to talk about is leading from the second chair in the Pacific Northwest. Steve is our executive pastor at Westside, and we've been working together for now
11 years.
11 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been really fun. We have a really great working relationship, and just to be totally honest, I would feel like I had a blindfold on and my hands were tied behind my back if you weren't on our team, and if we weren't, kind of figuring out how to, at this point, really finish each other's sentences.
Yeah, sandwiches.
Sandwiches. Yeah, sandwiches. No. So when we think about the idea of execution or leading from the second chair, is so important, and Upper Left is really all about how do we multiply the gospel in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. Such a critical thing. It doesn't really matter if you're talking about a micro church or even a house church or prevailing model church. There's always going to be that side of vision and then execution that we have to walk. So we're going to go there today. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and get into that?
So I am a dual citizen. Grew up in Canada, but spent the last 21 years in the States. But I've got, I say 3.5 kids because I've got 3 kids, and then we have a foster child that was with us for a couple of years, and she's back with her mom now, which is great, but she gets to hang out with us every once in a while. So she was with us this last weekend, and she's my half kid.
That's amazing.
But yeah, we've got a family that we started when my wife and I moved to Detroit, Michigan, straight out of college, and we spent some years there. And as my oldest was born, we moved out to Oregon, and we've been here for about the last 17 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now Detroit, that must have been different.
Yeah, it was for a Canadian from the West Coast.
Yeah.
Going to Detroit. I went there and went into ministry. So I was in college, knew I was going into ministry, and went to a church there. That's where I was going to be a middle school pastor.
Nice. And you did that for how long?
4 years. I did that. I was there. I started off as the middle school pastor, and then became the middle school and high school pastor, and then became the middle school, high school, and young adults.
Okay.
And then about after
right in the corporate ladder.
Oh my gosh! And then we were in the Great Recession, and I tapped out. It was too much, too fast, and then we were having a kid, and we decided, you know what? We either got to stick around here for the next decade, 2 decades, or we can tap out now. And we tapped out and moved to Oregon, where her family was from. Moved here,
right?
So we kind of had that support network.
Yeah.
But I did my years of ministry there, and it was great. But when I came to Oregon, I was like, I don't think I'm going to go back.
Yeah. So you were focused on career, and what kind of roles did you have during that season?
I was in sales. I was in the financial department. I spent probably one of the most fun roles that I had was I was a training specialist with Netflix, and that was a great team. It was a great job. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I always love to hear those stories about the stuff you learned at Netflix because it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and it was a really fascinating time. They were going through some massive growth. I remember we had to train 1,000 employees in, it must have been like 60 days or something. And it was that was crazy. It was
Yeah.
quite a ride.
I'll bet. Yeah. Okay, so you said no to ministry. You're like done with that.
Yep.
And what really was behind you going like, no, not ministry?
I don't know. I maybe had just, I used the word burnt out. Maybe maybe it was burnout. I don't know what it was, but I just decided no, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to experience other stuff. That was a lot to carry, and I didn't want to do it.
Okay.
And I was pretty reluctant, like very reluctant.
Yeah. Well, tell us about that, because you're here. You've been
Yeah.
11 years on staff with me, and we've been having a blast, actually. So at
we,
least I think we have we been?
Yeah, we've been having a blast.
Okay. Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Pretty sure. Last time I checked.
Okay.
So I moved down the street from this building, just down to the next major intersection, and we had 2 little kids, and my wife went, we should really get back into church.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because if we have little kids,
Mama
they
said
should go to church.
Yeah.
And I was like, sure, no problem. So I came and sat in still the same section that I sit in now.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Way in the back.
Way in the back.
Back.
Back in the corner, kind of in the shadows.
Yeah.
And I hid back there and made sure that my kids, I still had a relationship with Jesus, but I was like, I made sure my kids were there, but I wasn't going to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat back there for a long
hockey
time.
team on your screen while we were in church.
Absolutely. All the time. Yeah. And I sat back there for a long time. My wife thought it would be a good idea for us to get in a small group. And so she signed us up for a small group and put my phone number as the number for our family. Oh. And Nate, he's one of our directors now. It was his group. And he called me and said, hey, I'm just inviting you to the group. Glad that you're signed up. And I said, yeah, Nate, my wife signed us up. We're not really interested in coming. I'm not going to be there. And we didn't go the first season.
Okay.
And so my wife signed us up again for the same group the next season. And next season I was like, sorry, Nate, not coming. Third season, she signed us up again for Nate's group. And we went. And we were sitting in their living room for a few weeks in a row, and the group was growing, and it was outgrowing their living room, and they said, well, we need to probably multiply this group and start meeting at 2 different places, but we need a group leader. And my wife squeezed my hand, and I looked at her and I was like, knock it off, I know. And so I waited. And I won't forget this because I was on an evening shift at Netflix, and I called the group's leader, the assistant for the group's team, and said, my group is multiplying, and I think I want to step up into this role. And I will never forget. She said, no. And I think it was the Holy Spirit going, I got to get him to buy into this idea.
You tell him
no. Tell him no.
That's funny.
And I went, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And it didn't happen that season, but eventually I did get more involved and then honestly felt the real tug to actually get back into ministry, and had some coffees with you, and the rest kind of is history.
Yeah, it is. Well, okay, I want to back up to when your wife signed you up for a group 3 times and you said no. Mm-hmm. What were those conversations like after? Or did she even say anything? Did she just let you do your thing because she didn't want to push too hard, but she's going to push in her way?
Yeah. Yep.
That's so interesting. You guys are still happily married after all that. Wow.
Yeah. 21 years this year.
Awesome. Yeah. I remember when you first came on to our team, we were just going multi-site. And for those of you who are listening and watching, maybe remember back to if you saw the episode where we were talking about our kind of journey. We were multi-site for a while as a church at Westside, and then right before COVID, decided to release those churches as autonomous plants. Yeah. But you were jumping in right at the beginning of sheer chaos, absolute sheer chaos.
Yeah, it was. It was very muddy.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why, from my perspective, why I kept reaching out to you was, one, there was a leader in our church who told me one time, said, you should really have coffee with Steve Barker. I think he might be thinking about getting back into ministry. And I was like, Okay. And so I called and we met and met again. And it just seemed to me like you could bring some calm to our storm, and you could bring some strategy to our vision. And, and we really needed that at that time. We still do. So I'm, again, so glad that you're here.
I remember when we had a consultant come in and was helping us and did a strengths test with everybody on the team.
Yeah.
And I like telling this story. I tell it quite a bit when I'm talking about strengths. But I will never forget they put your test on this wheel. Yeah. And it showed where your strength was and where you had adapted to because of the pressures of the organization, right? And you were supposed to be in this upper right corner of this chart, but you had adapted kind of to the middle, this middle spot. And my natural spot was that middle spot, but I had adapted out of it. And I'll never forget looking across the table at you and going, Gabe, get out of my spot.
I remember that too. And actually, you bullied me because you and one of our other team members came up to me that day and kind of like it was an intervention.
Yes.
But it was a great one. Yeah.
Get out. And it's been fun ever since.
It has been. No, it really has been. I've had a lot more fun. We want to talk a little bit and unpack your role and how, leading from the second chair is so unique. And again, maybe there might be some people listening going, I'm not sure that applies to me, but just listen if that's you, because I think you're going to see gaps that either you fill or you need someone else to fill in your vision and in the thing that God is calling you to do. So talk a little bit about, the role of executive pastor. I mean, you think about ministries with multiple staff, multiple services, for sure that complexity of that calls for someone with really strong execution skills. And so I want you to describe a little bit about your role and why what you do can help reach people for Jesus and multiply.
Well, I think that I actually think more about your role and how difficult it is those times to stay focused on vision and kind of what is coming around the corner. It takes think time, and it takes paying attention. It takes not being tired and not being in the weeds. And the times that I think that you have not been the best leaders when you were stuck in the weeds. Yeah. And so my job is to come alongside you and go, let's get you out of the weeds. I'll take care of some of that stuff, and take some of the organizational structure pieces off, right? Manage finances, manage staff, do HR stuff, do all the systems pieces, to take that off the leader's plate so that they can really focus on leading. I think that's a big piece of it. And it's the piece that everybody jokes about too, right? When you and I are on a call and they say, "Oh, well, we don't have a Steve. We wish we had a Steve." Yeah, I think that's what they're saying, is someone just to take care of some of those execution pieces. But there's also, as our team grows, there's a need for someone to be paying attention to up and coming leaders and paying attention to alignment. And it's easy for teams to get distracted and spend some sideways energy, and even on a Sunday, even on any given Sunday, and the lead pastor can't do that if he's teaching, right? Just doesn't have the access to it. And so there's lots of that from the second chair that I get to do that's just helping to keep people focused on what we're trying to accomplish. And leadership development, I think, is a huge part of what I love about this. My role is being able to raise up leaders and train leaders to take things on. And honestly, in this season, having been on staff with this team for 10 years, that goes over COVID, right?
Yeah. That just made me tired thinking about that.
So it's 20 years, really. It's with COVID, it's 20. But right now, people are really spiritually hungry. I think very different than it was when I first got back into ministry. Yeah. And very hungry. And if we don't have some of honestly, the executive pastor is going to come out, the systems and the structures to be able to help as many of those people take steps, then we're not capitalizing on on what God's brought us. And shoot, we've been in that season for a little while now, and those systems and those people, the development of leaders to help reach all those people is important. And there's no way one person could do that.
Right. No, there's not. But it also, I mean, there's no way just anyone could do that. And I think that's where I'm always encouraged, because I just think back in your story too. Well, you worked at Netflix. The reason probably you stayed at Netflix was because they tapped into your very same impulse that you're exercising here, which is training people, preparing people, equipping. It's like you eat, sleep, and breathe that, really. I mean, on the side, you have a business doing that. I mean, it's part of who you are.
Yeah.
And that encourages me, because no matter who you are out there listening, watching, your giftedness, our uniqueness is always useful in God's kingdom. And I think it's really about finding the complementary team in any context, finding the complementary team where it all works together.
Yeah.
And I think that's been such a big plus here. But the other thing is that you're sort of a weird executive pastor in the sense that...
I'm waiting for the end of this sentence.
Okay. So catch us next time on Jesus to the Upper. No, you're a weird executive pastor because you care as much as I do about multiplication. And I mean, capital M, like let's plant churches, like let's give it away, let's send people. And I think that's a little unusual. I think a lot of times there'd be somebody maybe in an administrative or execution role who's trying to protect those things, protect the bottom line, maybe even seeing people and those things as bottom line or resources we should hang on to. But I think maybe at times I see you pushing me on those things. And so I think that's one of the reasons why that has helped us to plant churches and to plant campuses and to be thinking about it. But why don't you talk a little bit about what you notice? Here's what I want you to say first, and we're going to get to another question.
Okay.
But what do you do? Isn't that a question you get sometimes?
Yeah.
What is it that you do? Because you're a little bit,
just
Wizard of Oz kind of?
Yeah, walk around and intimidate people.
Yeah.
That's...
No, seriously, like what would you say is a week in the life of Steve Barker or an executive pastor at a church?
It's to keep things running efficiently, and that's people, and that's money, and that's buildings, and all of those pieces, and it's to keep those remove those speed bumps or keep them as flat as possible. That's
keep
how
the speed bumps flat.
as flat as possible.
That's pretty good. That's a good.
Yeah.
In what ways? Like, what do you do?
A lot of what I get to do is investing other leaders, helping other leaders think through how to solve problems. So I get to present problems and say, what are we going to do about that?
I thought you were just supposed to fix those
that.
problems.
No, because if I learned this a long time ago, if I fix every problem, then I'm going to fix that problem for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I can't be the one that... I should be able to jump anywhere into any role in the church and help out in any spot. But if I get stuck in any spot, I'm not doing the church service, right? If I'm the one that always has my finger in the hole of the dam and I'm not training anybody else to help repair the dam, then we're in trouble. So a lot of it is that I don't try not to do anything alone. If I'm doing our financial stuff, I've got other people that I'm constantly every week going, okay, this is how we're making this financial decision, and here's the task that you have to help make that happen. So what do I do? That's a great question. I do all of that. I take everything that you put on the table as vision and go, how in the world are we going to pull this off? That's what I do.
And I appreciate it. There's an impulse that I have that I am still working on, and it is to jump right to a solution. And because I think one of the things that leaders generally do is they see a solution, and they see the problem, they see a solution. And we probably all learned a long time ago from Andy Stanley that the reason why sometimes vision doesn't stick or people don't buy in is because we just present a solution instead of letting them wrestle with the problem. You're really good at letting people wrestle with the problem. so much so that sometimes people think you don't know the solution in a conversation or with a situation. And I can see you kind of sitting back, chuckling a little bit, going, the light bulb is going to go off any minute. It's just about to go off right now, but how do you what gives you the patience to do that?
I've seen it work enough times that I know that the other side of this is better.
Yeah.
Right. I think of one of the campus pastors that we launched when he started coming to our church when I was a campus pastor, and I remember him sticking around and kind of getting involved, and he came up to me after a workshop one day and he says, "All right, tell me why. Convince me to be baptized." And I looked at him and I said, "No." I said, "Go look in the Gospels, see when Jesus was baptized, and then come back and tell me what you think." And he went away for probably a week, and he came back the next weekend and he went, "All right, I'm going to get baptized." That is locked into my head forever. And that was baptism, and that wasn't necessarily just solving a problem, but he was so much more convinced. I would have never been able to convince him.
So good.
So I would much rather walk with people. I think that's what's different it's not completely different than the rest of the country, but I think it's a very high value out here is self-expression
for sure,
and exploration, right? So if I can give space for that, they're going to buy in way more than they might otherwise.
Well, and you just pushed on a huge difference, really, if you look at overall. And every context is unique, but let's talk more about that. What are some of the uniquenesses of your job or the role of execution in the Pacific Northwest, as opposed to maybe, let's say, Dallas, Texas, or I'm just going to pick on a few, St. Louis, Missouri, I don't know, whatever, Detroit, the East Coast. What's the difference? Because you're connected to a lot of people around the country, so it's not like you just be talking from thin air, but from your experience and connections across the country, what's different here?
I've worked there and consulted there. And, I think what is different, one big thing that's different is that pastors in the Pacific Northwest, we don't have a lot of authority. Like I even found when I was meeting my kids, the parents on my kid's football team when he was younger, it was several weeks before I told him I was a pastor. I was like, "You're going to like me first, and then I'll tell you that I'm a pastor, and we'll see if we're still friends." Like that's right. So there's no authority attached to it. And there's no heritage kind of really attached to it. So that is different here in that, man, it does have to be self-discovery. And it can't just be imported, right? Because even if I think about, we had campuses in different parts of the city, and even different parts of the city are like, that's not really our flavor.
True.
Right?
Particularly here in Portland, so neighborhood-centric. There's unique identities in all those neighborhoods, and
self-expression is very high. And then I'm like, "Are you like me? Do you belong in my?" Right. So there's a lot of value in that. So you can't just. Even we couldn't go 15 minutes down the road and just go import this, do this.
Yeah. Oh, we tried.
We tried.
Yeah.
And they get a little wiggly and be like, we'll do it because we know you and we like you.
Yeah.
But so that's definitely different. And because we don't have that same authority, just because the pastor says so doesn't mean anything here. I think you get laughed at a little bit. And there's not the heritage of, you made a joke a few weeks ago about kids like church song.
Right.
And you said, "How many of you know this song?" And you had to raise their hand in the service I was sitting in. I think a quarter of the room or less was like, "Oh yeah, no, we get it.
I was honestly surprised that anybody did. So I was like, what? There's people here to know that?
John Christ came to do a show here once, and I remember he was doing a bit about old songs, and there were I took a guy with me who's a first generation believer.
Okay.
And John is singing this song, and I'm chanting back some of the stuff. And the buddy I brought with me was like, "What are you on? Like, how do you guys all know this?"
Okay, so you're saying we have to persuade people differently. What else?
Yeah, and even build some of those systems. Like when you think about financial generosity. When I where I grew up with my church, that was something that was just kind of taught as a kid. Like that was something
obedience-based giving.
Yeah, that existed even in churches that I've served in other parts of the country. We don't have that luxury, right? Like I've got to create systems that ensure that everybody gets taught how you grow in generosity and what does tithing even look like, and those pieces that I would have taken for granted otherwise.
Yeah.
Like everybody would just know, right? And we don't have that same luxury.
Yeah. If you're thinking about somebody who wants to come plant a church in Portland and they know they need a team, what advice do you have for the type of person that they should pick to be their sort of execution backbone? Does that make sense?
I think someone who is curious. I think there's a lot of value in curiosity, and I think that the type of person who, when you start to throw out ideas, they start to write them in order of execution.
That's good.
I think, and maybe that's just I have a bias towards that because that's how I think. But I think that's very important. I think you got to be curious about the people, the neighborhood, the city that you're in, and understand how people view the world, and then if you want the space to lead, you're going to want somebody that comes along behind you and goes, okay, well, let's do it in this order.
Yeah, good point. And so I maybe my advice to anybody who's right now leading a team but doesn't have this person with them, and if that's you, you're listening right now going like, yep, that's me. I desperately need somebody like that. Maybe what would help attract that person is for you to be willing to leave a vacuum, because one of the things that I think on my worst days, I'm not leaving a vacuum for you. If that makes sense. I'm for some reason I'm waking up going, I got to cross the T's and dot the I's today, and I got to, and once in a while I do.
It's what
slip
pulled
back
me in.
into that.
It's what pulled me in. I'll never forget having coffee with you, and you had said we were going to launch a new campus, and I hadn't heard the plan, so I came to the meeting with an 8-step plan. And I was like, I can't believe he still had another coffee with me after I slapped him in the face with. It doesn't look like you have a plan.
I was like, dang, we need a plan. That's a good one right there. Let's do it.
No, but leaving a space for that, and I think being really comfortable with the outcome that you want. We use this language all the time about having a canvas.
Yeah.
And I think with high capacity leaders, you have to be able to say it's a really big canvas. And I just want it to be an owl in the end. I'm not even going to tell you what colors. I'm not going to tell you if it's one owl or 3 owls. Like whatever but you're giving a big enough canvas to say this is the outcome that I want.
Yeah.
But you figure out how to.
That's really good.
Get it
and I, as the leader of our organization, I've learned I have to do that. Because if I don't, then I end up creating this monster where that I got to go deconstruct what just happened and disappoint the people that put their blood, sweat, and tears into a project that I wasn't clear about. They loved it because they did the work. Now I'm like, can you shred that?
Yeah.
That doesn't fit.
Absolutely. And I'll do nothing else for you.
Exactly. Oh, very good. What are some things that you think we currently do so that we can function like this? I mean, can you think of tactical things that we do that make a relationship, or even if you think about any complementary team relationship, what do you think are critical tactics to use so that you can stay on the same page and be marching in one direction?
Well, it's communication, but I think that comes in that's kind of a blanket term, right? So I think that you and I especially have very open paths of communication, but we also spend time every week kind of going, let's look at how things are going. What do we need to address? What adjustments do we need to make? So we're staying on the same page on a regular basis. But then we also do a thing where once a month we're stopping for a day and going, let's just make sure we're on the same page. Let's ideate on some ideas for the future. Let's solve some problems. And it allows me to honestly understand what you're thinking. It allows me to tinker with stuff before it's fully baked in your head. I shouldn't have told you that.
No, that's why I always try to say this cement is still wet.
Yeah. I think those help us to work really well and figure out how to balance. That's just even for just you and I. But when we pull in key other leaders into that regular rhythm of saying, this is what we're focused on, alignment, right? Saying this is where we're going. This is what we're trying to tackle. How are things going? What's your guys' perspective? Speak into this. And you get to, I think this goes back to what I think is different here is that you can't be a professor here. You have to be a guide.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? Nobody's going to listen to you if you stand up at the front of the room and lecture them and tell them how they're right or wrong, or they won't give you the time of day, or they won't for very long, but they'll listen to a river guide, right? Who's going, okay, well, we're not going to paddle towards that eddy. We're going to try to miss that, right? That's getting them involved, but also kind of directing the way. And
yeah. Maybe this is my last big question. When you think about what it takes to be a church in the Pacific Northwest and be able to multiply, what do you think are the absolute crucial things that have to be in place from your seat now? I mean, you've got experience. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've seen it happen. There's been good seasons for us and not so great seasons for us in multiplication. What makes that even possible? Because it's hard to survive. It's hard to survive, let alone try to hive off enough energy to multiply. What do you see that makes that work?
I think there's a couple of things. One is a relentless amount of energy spent on leadership development. Always, like there should always be leadership development happening. You should always be investing in the next up and coming leaders. That will always pay off, always. And I think maybe a learning for me, for us, was the really solid systems, but the minimum effective dose. What is the least amount of systems that you can have that will make it run efficiently?
Okay, why do you say that? Why do you say least instead of max it out?
Because I think that especially here, people need the space to be themselves, to put their own skin on how they execute, kind of the last mile execution of ministry. And if I dictate from the start to the very end, even though I'll be right and it'll be better, just kidding. They're gonna have more ownership. But I've got to have at least the bare bones pieces that I can say this is the minimum, right?
Yeah.
So everything you can add whatever you want on top of this, but this is the absolute minimum.
Yeah. I think I've also noticed that one of the reasons why having minimum systems works well in the Pacific Northwest, I think, might be partly financial, because the reality is a lot of our team here is volunteer, which means they're not working 40 hours behind a desk. They're probably, an engineer at a place, or they're running a company, or they're a full-time parent, and then they do a pretty significant role on the side, which means they don't have time to learn 15 systems.
No.
And so having minimum is very helpful there.
No. And again, like the leadership investment, we were joking earlier today that we were starting to attract some more professional videographers.
Yeah.
And how unique that was, because, man, for the last forever, it's been, what do you do on the side? It has nothing to do with video. Let's teach you how to operate a camera.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
There is always, you're always investing and helping people step up. I think that's the thing that I've enjoyed the most here.
Yeah.
Is those leaders that have come in really green. And now, a couple of years later, are capital L leaders that are having hard conversations that if I would have told them 2 years ago, you're going to have these kind of hard conversations, they would have laughed in my face and said, no way.
When you think about leadership development, just to poke on that for a second, talk a little bit about what you think has helped us to go to the next level on that.
I think that giving a space for ministry, really specifically ministry leadership learning to happen. We have a leadership program that walks participants through several different areas of ministry leadership that requires them to do a little bit of learning, but also to be really practical and implement some of that stuff in their ministry. And I think that's been really, really valuable in raising the quality of leader that's been leading in our church, because it's hands-on, but it's not. It's heavy stuff that they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I appreciate you so much, and I learned something about you today, which was how to motivate you, which means now all I have to do is say no, and you're going to be for sure interested in everything that I say.
Yeah.
So that's the next thing. But how can people get connected with you if they want to follow what you're doing on your side business, to coach leaders there, or stay up to date with you?
I have a really simple place that I put all of that stuff. It's StephenJBarker.com. Just the letter J.
Nice.
StephenJBarker.com. And that's where it all lives.
Great. Thanks for being with me today.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com, where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.